London, 1905, just as the bells of Westminster Abbey tolled for a wedding that would never happen. The cold rain fell hard on the gray stone, turning flower petals into pulp and silks into sodden weight. Inside the abbey, the whispers grew louder than the choir. The king's niece, Lady Adelaide Linwood, stood alone at the altar, her veil trembling with every breath, her groom long gone. He had vanished. No note, no word, no warning. Adelaide's hands, still gloved in ivory lace, clenched tight around her bouquet. White roses crushed in her grip. The bishop cleared his throat. A page boy cried. In the pews, titled heads turned toward the door. Still no one came. The Queen Mother stood, pale with fury. "This embarrassment cannot stand," she hissed to the man beside her, Nathaniel Hargrove, senior advisor to His Majesty King Edward VII. "Fix it." Nathaniel bowed, already moving. He found Adelaide in the sacristy, where she'd fled minutes earlier, her train trailing behind like a wounded banner. She stood by a window, staring blankly at the rain. "Lady Adelaide," Nathaniel said quietly. She didn't turn. "He's not coming." "No. I knew it," she whispered. "Last night, he said he had something to tell me. I thought he was nervous. I thought he loved me." Nathaniel hesitated, then stepped closer. "He was a coward. And a fool." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "That makes two of us, then." "No," his voice was firm. "You walked into that church with dignity. You stood before the crown, the court, and God. That takes courage." She finally turned. Her face was blotched from trying not to cry, but she was still beautiful, even more so for not pretending to be untouched by pain. "What happens now?" "Now," Nathaniel said, "you leave through the side door. I'll handle the rest." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone should." He offered his arm. She stared at it, then took it. They walked out under a shared umbrella, Adelaide's ruined veil trailing behind them like a ghost of what might have been. The scandal consumed the city by nightfall. The Marquis of Denshire, her would-be groom, had boarded a ship to Cairo that very morning. No explanation. No apology. Only a single telegram to the king. "Cannot go through with it. Forgive me." Parliament murmured. The court speculated. And Adelaide Linwood became the most pitied woman in England. But she wasn't interested in pity. She stayed at her family's townhouse in Belgravia, refused callers, and ignored the mountain of floral condolences. Only Nathaniel came, bringing with him the quiet calm of someone who understood the weight of duty. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't recite platitudes. He brought books, newspapers, and once, a tin of ginger biscuits from her favorite bakery in Mayfair. "I thought you advisors were supposed to be heartless," she said over tea one afternoon. "I'm not heartless," he said. "I just know when words are useless." A silence stretched between them. Comfortable. Unspoken. Weeks passed. The court moved on. But Adelaide hadn't forgotten the humiliation. She wanted answers. And she believed Nathaniel could help her find them. "I want the truth," she said one morning, stepping into his office at Whitehall unannounced. Nathaniel looked up from a stack of telegrams. "Adelaide, don't lie to me," she said. "You knew something. You were at the palace every day. You saw him. You knew." Nathaniel stood. "I suspected. I didn't know." "Then help me know. Help me find out why he left." He stared at her. "That could ruin reputations." "I don't care. It could put you in danger." She lifted her chin. "Then you'll protect me." He exhaled slowly. "You don't know what you're asking." "I know exactly what I'm asking," she said. "And I know you'll do it." He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "If we do this, there's no turning back." "I don't want to turn back." He studied her, then nodded once. "Then we start tonight." They met beneath the clock tower after dark. The rain had stopped, but left the streets gleaming. Adelaide wore a dark cloak, hood low. Nathaniel handed her a folded map and a sealed note. "This is for a man in Southwark," he said. "Name's Ellery. He used to work for the Marquis's household. He might know something. Why not go yourself? I'd be recognized." "You won't." She took the envelope. Their fingers brushed. He didn't pull away. Adelaide swallowed. "Do you always do this for fallen brides?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. "No, just you." The visit to Ellery changed everything. The old valet, now half drunk and bitter, told Adelaide that the Marquis had been threatened by someone within the royal household. There were letters. Secrets. A debt owed to a foreign envoy. And a warning. Marry Adelaide, and the truth would come out. She returned to Nathaniel shaken, The envelope crumpled in her hand. "He didn't leave because he stopped loving me," she said. "He left because someone scared him off." Nathaniel nodded grimly. "And I think I know who." The next days were a blur: covert meetings, coded messages, and a rising storm neither of them could outrun. The web reached higher than either had guessed. There were members of the Privy Council involved, and whispers of blackmail reaching as far as the Russian embassy. Adelaide pressed on. So did Nathaniel. In quiet rooms and shadowed alleys, their alliance deepened. He taught her how to spot a tail, how to read a coded letter by firelight, how to slip through a crowd unnoticed. One night, after narrowly avoiding a trap at the docks, they took shelter in a lamplighter's shed. Her hands trembled. He held them. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "I want to," she whispered. "Because you believe me. Because you stay." He touched her cheek with the back of his hand. "I'd stay through anything." She leaned into his touch, and in that moment no titles, no court, no scandal. She kissed him. Not as a fallen bride, but as a woman choosing something for herself at last. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. He kissed her back. The morning after the kiss, a low fog hung over the Thames, swallowing the city in its damp breath. Nathaniel arrived at the Linwood townhouse before the hour turned 7, clothes still damp from the night's chase, boots muddied from the riverbank. The maid who let him in glanced once at the state of him, then turned silently and led him upstairs. Adelaide was pacing the drawing room with a folded scrap of paper in her hand. Her hair was pinned differently today, tighter, more severe, but her eyes held the same sharpness he remembered from the night before. "I went back to Ellery," she said without greeting. He lied. Nathaniel's coat was still wet on his shoulders, but he stepped forward. "What did he say this time?" "He said he forgot something. That there was a letter. He handed it to me like it meant nothing." She opened the paper, revealing a single line written in an unsteady hand. "They know about the ledger. He fears exposure more than exile." Nathaniel read it once, then again. "Ledger." She crossed to the sideboard and pulled out a narrow brass key. "I asked my father's steward about any records the Marquis had left behind. He said there was a locked box in the Densheire hunting lodge. This key was found under a drawer in his study. I think it fits." He took the key, weighing it. "That lodge is in Gloucestershire, nearly 2 days by carriage. Then we leave tonight." His gaze flicked upward. "You'll be recognized. I'll wear mourning. No one looks twice at a woman in black." That evening, under the guise of visiting a cousin in Bath, Adelaide boarded a modest stagecoach with Nathaniel at her side, both dressed with the careful anonymity of the middle gentry. She kept her face turned from the light, her gloved hands folded in her lap. They spoke little on the journey. She read from a book of elegies. He scribbled notes into a small leather-bound journal. Once, when the coach hit a rut and her shoulder brushed his, she didn't pull away. They arrived at the lodge just before dusk 2 days later, the sky pale and rimmed in gold. The grounds had been left untended, grass high, shutters closed like folded arms. Nathaniel pried open the back door with a rusted hinge and led the way by lantern light. The box was in the study, as the steward had said, hidden beneath the floorboards, wrapped in oilcloth. Adelaide unlocked it with the brass key. Inside were ledgers, and beneath the ledgers, a sealed envelope marked with the Densheire crest. She opened it with steady fingers. The parchment inside trembled as she read. "To whomever finds this, I was warned. If I married Adelaide, I would lose control of my inheritance. The money is not clean. It was passed through the hands of men who would not survive daylight. I was given a choice, flee or fall with them. Forgive me. See." Nathaniel read it over her shoulder. He was laundering funds, likely through foreign intermediaries. Adelaide folded the letter. "And someone in the palace knew. They didn't just want to stop the marriage," he said. "They wanted to keep you from finding this." She sat down in the worn leather armchair behind the desk. "Then we bring it to the king." Nathaniel was silent a moment. "That would burn everything. The Marquis's name. The families connected to him. Possibly members of the Privy Council." She looked up. "You're afraid." "I'm not afraid for myself." "Then for whom?" He met her gaze. "For you. You'll be dragged through court again. Your name will never be clean. It's already been dragged through the mud. I've nothing left to protect except the truth." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll stand with you." They spent the night in the caretaker's quarters above the stables, the only rooms unsoiled by time and damp. Adelaide sat by the hearth, her hands to the warmth. Nathaniel stood by the window, watching the woods roll into dark. You never told me, she said softly, why you joined the king's service. He didn't turn. My father was in trade. Lost everything in a shipping collapse when I was 10. We went hungry that winter. A baroness took pity-sent food. Years later, I found out it had been my mother who wrote her. I never forgot that. That one letter could change a life. Adelaide watched him with quiet intensity. You've spent your life cleaning up after others' messes. Yes. And who cleans up after you? He turned then, leaning against the frame. No one ever has. She rose, walking slowly across the room. Then let me. He didn't speak. She reached up and unpinned her hair, the strands falling loose with a single breath. She looked up at him. I'm not asking for rescue, she said. Only a place to rest. He touched her face, fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. You already have it. She leaned into him, and again, it was not desperation but decision. They stood there a long time, in the hush of wood and firelight, wrapped not in scandal or grief, but in something quieter, something earned. Outside, the wind pressed against the glass. Inside, the past began to loosen its grip. The summons came 3 days after they returned to London, delivered by a uniformed footman with the seal of St. James's Palace pressed into the wax. Nathaniel broke it open beneath the gaslight in his sitting room, the edge of the parchment curling from damp. The message was brief, formal, and absolute. His Majesty requests your presence. Noon. Privy Chamber. Adelaide sat across from him, her gloves off, hands wrapped around a glass of cinnamon cordial. He knows, she said. He knows enough to want it silenced, Nathaniel replied. His jaw tightened as he folded the letter. They'll want the ledgers. They'll never see them. I've already sent them to a solicitor in Edinburgh. He's under instruction to open the package only if anything happens to either of us. Nathaniel paused. You're thinking like someone who expects betrayal. I've been taught by the best. He didn't smile. Instead, he crossed to the window, looking out over the low shingled rooftops of Pimlico, the sun still weak in the cold. If I go alone, I can draw the fire. You won't go without me. You're not sworn to the crown. No, she said, standing. But I'm not afraid of it anymore. They arrived through the servants' entrance, cloaked and quiet, and were led by a stony-eyed steward past the long corridors of tapestry and oil-polished wood to the privy chamber. There, beneath a carved ceiling of Tudor roses and rampant lions, stood the king. Edward VII looked older than his portraits, his eyes more faded, his frame heavier beneath the brocade. But his gaze was sharp as a blade. He dismissed the chamberlain with a flick of the hand. Lady Linwood. Mr. Hargrove. Adelaide curtsied. Nathaniel bowed. The king gestured to the table before him. Upon it lay a single sheet of paper and a cut-glass decanter, half full with claret. You've made yourselves very visible. Nathaniel spoke first. We intended only to bring clarity to a matter that was hidden, Your Majesty. Adelaide stepped beside him. We have no interest in scandal, only in truth. The king's fingers drummed once against the table. You understand that if what you claim is true, at least 2 peers of the realm may face treason charges. We have no intention of bringing the matter before the public, Nathaniel said. But the truth must be acknowledged. And what do you want in return for your silence? Adelaide lifted her chin. Freedom. From the stain he left on my name. From the pity. And from any arrangement that would bind me again without consent. The king studied her a long moment, then turned to Nathaniel. And you? Nathaniel's voice was clear. I want the same for her. The king poured a measure of claret into a crystal tumbler. You've always been loyal, Hargrove. Yes, sir. And yet you've broken ranks for her. Nathaniel looked directly at him. Only to preserve what remains of the crown's integrity. The king sipped the wine. You've always had a careful tongue. I suppose that's why I kept you so close. He set the glass down without sound. You will hand over the original ledgers. They will be destroyed. No charges will be filed. The Marquis will be declared dead in absentia within the year. And Lady Linwood? Nathaniel asked. She will be granted a royal dispensation to live as she chooses. Unmarried, unburdened, and unspoken of. Adelaide's voice was quiet. I would also like the right to marry again. Should I choose? The king blinked. To whom? Nathaniel didn't move. Adelaide didn't look away. To him, she said. A long pause. Then Edward leaned back in his chair with a sigh. You do know you've made me a laughingstock in 3 courts already. Nathaniel inclined his head. We've done only what necessity demanded. The king exhaled. Very well. The dispensation will be written, but your resignation, Hargrove, will be expected upon its signing. Nathaniel nodded once. It will be on your desk in the morning. They left the chamber without another word, the corridor behind them falling into silence like a curtain. Once outside, crossing the gravel sweep of the forecourt, Adelaide reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation. Later that night, in the study of her family's townhouse, Adelaide walked barefoot across the carpet to the low desk where the ledgers had once rested. The place felt different now, no longer a room of waiting, but of beginning. Nathaniel stood by the hearth, the low flame casting his face in gold. You'll be watched. Even now. I know. He crossed to her, took her hands in his. There's no crown left to wear. No position. I'll have only what I can make with my own work. I never wanted a title, she said. Only a life I chose. She laid her head against his chest. His hands came around her. They stayed that way as the fire crackled and the hours passed, no longer fugitives or pieces in someone else's game, but two people who had carved a path through the wreckage and found, in each other, something whole. Outside, London slept. Inside, the room was quiet, save for the soft sound of her breath as she said, I loved you long before I knew it. He kissed her hair. And I've been waiting for you without knowing I was. Nothing more needed to be said. The following spring settled into London with the hush of rain-washed lilacs and the particular kind of light that made the soot-stained bricks of Belgravia shimmer like wet stone. Adelaide stood beneath the greenhouse archway in her aunt's garden, fingers brushing the fronds of a fern newly brought from Madeira. The air smelled of citrus oil and damp moss, a scent that clung to her skin long after she'd left the glass walls behind. Nathaniel arrived just after midday, dressed less like a court advisor and more like a man returning from a long walk across Hampstead Heath, dust on his cuffs, his collar loosened at the throat. He carried a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. I wasn't expecting you until evening, she said, not displeased. I left the solicitor early. The deed's been approved. He offered her the parcel. It's official. She took it, unwrapping the paper slowly. Inside, a folded legal document inked with her name and as joint proprietors of a modest stone house near Rye, surrounded by fields and not much else. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she lifted the parchment and ran her fingertips over the seal. Does it have a kitchen with a window? She asked. He smiled faintly. South-facing. Overlooks a line of apple trees. She nodded once, eyes brighter than they had been all morning. Then yes. Nathaniel stepped closer. You're sure? I've been sure since the moment I realized no one else would ever ask what sort of window I wanted in a kitchen. He didn't touch her. Not yet. Instead, he glanced toward the glass roof of the greenhouse. Your aunt mentioned she'd like to host a supper before we leave. Adelaide folded the deed with care and slipped it into her skirt pocket. She plans to invite the Duchess of Marlborough. Likely to prove I haven't disappeared into disgrace. You haven't, he said. I know that now. She looked up, but I didn't for a long time. They walked the perimeter of the greenhouse garden, past lemon balm and climbing roses, their steps soft on the gravel path. She stopped beside a bench and gestured for him to sit. I had a letter yesterday, she said, once they were seated. He waited. From the Marquis's solicitor in Alexandria. It appears he drowned last month in the Nile. A ferry accident. His body was recovered downstream. Nathaniel's brows lowered, but his expression remained still. Will there be an inquiry? There's nothing to inquire. It was an accident. He was traveling alone under a false name. They only confirmed his identity through the signet ring he never stopped wearing. She didn't cry. Her voice held no tremor. I thought I'd feel something, she said, after a moment. Anger, relief, pity. But I feel quiet. You don't owe him grief. I know. She turned to him. But I think I owe myself the truth of what we were. He wasn't evil, just too fragile for the world he was born into. Nathaniel reached for her hand, the touch careful. That's more grace than most would offer. I don't want to carry bitterness into a new life, she said. And I certainly don't want to carry him. You won't, he said. They sat in silence until the garden clock chimed the hour. Adelaide stood first. There's something I'd like to show you. Upstairs. He followed her through the conservatory and into the main house, past gaslit sconces and the soft hush of drawn curtains. On the second floor, she led him into a small study filled with cedarwood and old maps. A trunk stood open near the window, half packed with books and folded linens. "I've been choosing what to bring," she said. "Not much. Just what I'd miss." She crossed to the writing desk and opened a drawer. From it, she withdrew a slim, leather-bound volume. "I found this in my father's library last week. It belonged to my mother." She handed it to him. He opened it with care. Inside were pages of pressed flowers, handwritten recipes, and sketches of wild herbs annotated in a delicate, looping script. "She kept it before she married," Adelaide said. "She gave it up when she became a viscountess." "I'm not doing that." Nathaniel closed the book gently and handed it back. "You shouldn't," he said. "I want a garden," she said. "I want to grow things with names I don't have to look up. I want a kitchen that smells like fruit in summer and wood smoke in winter." He stepped forward, close enough that the scent of rosemary from her hands brushed his throat. "And I want you in that kitchen," she said. "Not as a guest, not as a visitor. As the man who helped me tear down everything false and build something from the earth." He touched her waist, just lightly. "Will you marry me, Adelaide Linwood?" "Yes," she whispered. His kiss was quiet, no urgency, no fire, just the warmth of trust, the surety of two people who had walked through ruin and found each other waiting on the other side. Outside, the bells from St. James's faintly echoed across the rooftops, but neither of them moved. For once, there was no audience, no court, no judgment, only the promise of a life unshaped by anyone's expectations but their own.